He is a Wall Street criminal defense attorney, also a former prosecutor. Vinoo, thanks for being with us again tonight. It has long been argued a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, but it's also no secret the former president is not popular in New York. Do you see a New York jury acquitting Donald Trump regardless of what he is charged with?
So the term acquittal is not used in the grand jury. The term is actually, will they vote what's called a no true bill, meaning that they vote that there's not enough evidence to go forward. So is that possible? With the way that this grand jury has been composed of, or the way that it seems to be, the way the prosecutor seems to be moving with this grand jury, that is a possibility. It seems to me that there's been evidence presented, and in a grand jury, the district attorney controls the grand jury, controls the witnesses. Unless Trump has given his notice of his intention to testify, there is no right for former President Trump to present any evidence today. But today, there seemed to be some testimony from one of his lawyers to rebut the things that Michael Cohen has said. This is beyond unusual. This is not standard practice. So there seem to be a lot of unusual things going on. So anything is possible.
Understanding the grand jury,
if they actually vote.
Yeah, understanding the grand jury process. My question really dealt more with moving to the next phase. If he was indeed indicted, do you see a jury in New York that would acquit Donald Trump, regardless of the charges?
No, I do not. So I think his lawyers would have to move for a change of venue. They would, and they'd have a strong argument that the Manhattan jury pool is so far blue, so far tainted in one direction that it would be impossible for him to get a fair trial in New York, and perhaps move for a change of venue if he actually gets indicted, which I think is still a major if at this point. I think it's publicity seeking by him, by former President Trump, to say an arrest is imminent when there's been no information given to his team that an indictment is actually pending tomorrow. And I think it's also publicity stunt to some extent by DA Alvin Bragg to cover up criticism of him for not investigating or discontinuing an investigation into Trump tomorrow. But your question regarding fair trial in New York City, particularly in Manhattan, no chance. So I think he'd have a good shot to get this moved to a suburb like Nassau County, where the blue and red lines are pretty evenly split.
The former president has consistently denied ever having an affair with Stormy Daniels. Paying hush money, as you know, is a misdemeanor. How it was documented, though, in the Trump Organization's books is a different story. How tough do you see this case being to prove on the part of Alvin Bragg? And let me ask the question this way. Based on what you know and how heightened the tensions are around this particular case, do you now see Alvin Bragg as having a lane to back down?
That's a great question as to Alvin Bragg's lane, but let's address the first part of your question, or the first question, which is the issue of how difficult this will be to prove. So there's nothing illegal about making payments, or AKA to making hush money payments. It's a question of how it's documented. The problem that DA Bragg has is that these events happen well past the statute of limitations for both misdemeanors and felonies. Now, I heard an interesting legal argument today that they may say that while he was president in D.C., they couldn't touch him, but I don't think that's accurate. They could have served an arrest warrant on him at that point. So I think that these charges are unsustainable. But in terms of a lane for DA Bragg, I think at this point, politically, if he doesn't do something or say he did something, then he's going to be out as the next district attorney of Manhattan, because that's how rabidly anti-Trump Manhattan is.
You know, so much has been said about the fact that a former president has never been indicted. But what would it say to New Yorkers if he is not indicted? In the lead, I pointed out Eliot Spitzer, the former governor, resigned after allegations he was involved with prostitutes. Anthony Weiner, the former congressman, resigned after he sent a lewd photo to a college student and another woman. America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, facing disbarment in several jurisdictions. So The flip side of that coin is what happens, what does it say to New Yorkers if he is not indicted?
Well, it depends on your definition of New Yorker, right? So the traditional blue New Yorker here in Manhattan will be very angry. I imagine in other parts of the state, which are more evenly split. Don't get me wrong, this is still a blue state and a predominantly anti-Trump state. But I think people looking at this reasonably, if he's not indicted, if you look at this, I don't see how this prosecution is going to be sustainable, even if it were to be brought. I don't see how these charges are going to be sustainable. They have a serious problem with the statute of limitations. They're also going to have a difficult time proving that Trump knew that this was being concealed in a illegal manner. The other problem they have is it seems at most they're going to have a misdemeanor, which to me sounds like a waste of judicial, or I should say prosecutorial resources, because they're going to have to show that the crime that he was concealing, or that he was concealing another crime, in order for it to be a felony. And that crime would be federal campaign violations, which I'm not sure is prosecutable under state law. When I say I'm not sure, I'm being sort of facetious, which is not a state law charge. So I think there are numerous problems with this case.
But is it fair to look at this in a political lens? Because the people that I mentioned a second ago, no calls for protest when Eliot Spitzer was forced to resign. No calls for protest when Andrew Cuomo was forced to resign. No calls for protest when Anthony Weiner was forced to resign. What makes the treatment of Donald Trump different?
Well, all three men that you have mentioned were all basically not
Democrats.
Charged, or Weiner was charged.
And they resigned.
Well, I think the problem was they all involved sexual offenses that dealt with problems while they were in office. Remember, in 2016, Trump was a candidate. He had not become president. So these are things that happened while they were in office. And it's what led to the calls for resignations. I mean, all of them had their backers, but I didn't see anyone losing sleep over Spitzer having to resign. And certainly by the time Cuomo resigned, I would say the majority of New Yorkers were against him, and particularly disgusted by the accusations. And if they weren't disgusted by those accusations, they were clearly doubtful of him because of the nursing home scandal. Weiner's Weiner, it's another story, and ugly, just purely ugly.
Vinoo, we've got you on speed dial, criminal defense attorney, also a former prosecutor. Thanks for being with us again tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You got it.